All right, so we're going to start earliest and then go to later. Okay, so we're just going to go into general things about the Civil War. So we're going to start with economics of the North and South. Things to know about economics of the North. More successful. We're able to have a more stable economy. Because they had more of the textile industries and a more industrialized society, they were able to last throughout the war without having to just stop because of the war that was going on. They created a money system called greenbacks. They created the IRS to be able to collect taxes in order to fund it. Much more stable economy in the North, which helped them to be able to win. In the South, economy plummets. They don't have a unified currency system. Their economics is going to massively suffer. People are without jobs. People don't have a lot of money. Plantation owners in the South lose 90% of their wealth, mostly because they lose their slaves. Inflation is going to skyrocket. Because of that, bread riots increase, as in people fighting over bread because they cannot eat. So, North, successful, able to stabilize the economy. South, unsuccessful, causes massive economic distress. And also, if you think about like Sherman's March to the Sea, which I'll cover in just a second, Sherman's March to the Sea pretty much destroyed the entire infrastructure of the South. And so because of that, that's another economic suffering for that. But this is an important one. Not just for this, but hint, hint, for your test. Okay? So this is not just for this is for your test as well. Okay, heading into George McClellan and George Meade. These would just be identifiers. I'm not going to ask you specifically on these people. Both of these are going to be Union generals. He pretty much sucks. He's awful. No, he really is. There's so many jokes about him. Because he refused to basically go into battle, so every time Lincoln would say go to battle, he'd say nah, and then he'd just hang out. And that's pretty much why he got fired. George Meade is going to be a better general, but we get better and better as time goes on with generals like Grant and things like that. Meade comes into the general position only 3 days before Gettysburg. But these would be just, if you see these, know that they are Union generals. Britain's impact on the war. So remember that Britain decides to be neutral. They really needed to be able to, they wanted the continent in the South, but they knew that if they sided with the South, that they risk losing Canada and also risk having a massive war, and also risk having that cotton cut off when the Civil War ends. So they choose not to go into it for those economic reasons, those political reasons of Canada, and then also, in terms of socially, Uncle Tom's Cabin. All the people in England begin to read that book and now say that slavery is bad, and so because of that, they're going to end it, and then they are going to decide not to go and be a part of the war. Okay. Couple of key battles and things like that. Sherman's March to the Sea is going to be one of the last ones. It's the complete destruction of infrastructure, and that's what you really need to know. Complete destruction of the infrastructure. Remember, that's where they have the Sherman neckties or the Sherman's pretzels, where they twisted all the railroad lines. They destroyed the southern railroad lines, and they basically burned everything. So they set the entire state of Georgia pretty much on fire, all the way to the sea, and because of that, it gets completely destroyed, and it really is morally awful because people start to be able to say, we're never going to win this war. It's politically and socially because it completely destroys the South, especially the economy. So this is another economic one right here.
Could that be counted as a cause of Reconstruction?
I mean, yeah, you could say that if you wanted to. Hey, while you're up, do you want to shut the door for me?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it could be a cause of Reconstruction if you were to have a causation essay on it, yeah. And then Battle of Antietam is going to be the bloodiest day in American history with the most amount of death. Things that you need to know about this is it caused the North to start to be worried that they weren't going to be able to win. And then it also caused massive death for the North, and they realized they needed a much better generalship, or else they weren't going to be able to win anything in the war. Appomattox, the signing of the Treaty of Appomattox. So where you would see this is most likely a sourcing on a stimulus set, where people would say, it would have the treaty, and then it says Treaty at Appomattox, and you'd say, oh, that's the end of the war. That's kind of like an idea in your head from Appomattox. Copperheads are going to be the Northern Democrats who are going to ask for an immediate end to the war. They say it's not economical, it is not healthy because we're literally all dying, and they also say just let the South secede, let's end the war. So the major impact of the Copperheads is they're going to try to end the war. They are not successful. Think of the Copperheads as that snake cartoon that we looked at, where they're trying to stop it. And then the Union sees that as you're trying to stop the Union and block the Union from being able to be one nation. Okay. I don't know what... Oh, wait, that's, I think, for debate. I don't think that's us. Okay. Any more Civil War stuff before we move on to Reconstruction? Okay. So, heading into Reconstruction. Reconstruction's a really big term. I will try my best to describe it, because that's like a 90-minute presentation. But things that are going to happen immediately with Johnson's presidency. So Johnson becomes the president after Lincoln dies. First thing that gets enacted is the Freedmen's Bureau. The Freedmen's Bureau is created in order to be able to create more rights for African Americans. So they're going to make sure that the South is staying in order. They're going to give schools. They're going to encourage literacy, help people register how to vote. This is a positive of Johnson's presidency. Nowadays it's called the Civil Rights Commission. That changes following in 1960. So we had the Freedmen's Bureau actually for quite some time. Why is everyone writing not everywhere?
That's one person.
Somebody wrote not twice, whoever that was.
Why are you looking at me?
It was one of you guys over there. It happened when you guys were working. Okay, anyways. Civil Rights Act of 1866. This is going to be an example of a way that they attempted, the radical Republicans, to get more rights for African Americans in the United States. It would have massively expanded African American rights, made them almost completely equal on a political level, as well as a social level with other people around them. Remember, Johnson vetoes this because he believes that you should not have anything past the 13th Amendment for rights. So basically, the only rights that African Americans have is they're not allowed to be slaves. That's it. So the Civil Rights Act of 1866 would have been a great example of massive expansion of rights, but unfortunately it gets vetoed, and we don't have the Civil Rights Act until we get into 1963. During Reconstruction, we had two groups of people, remember the carpetbaggers and the scalawags, that are going to attempt to misuse the South for their own personal gain. Scalawags are going to be the ones, those are the salamander pictures. They're the politicians in the South that begin to compromise with the North. They get some kickbacks from that. They get benefits from that economically for being able to compromise with the North. Yes, it means giving rights to African Americans, but you're also getting kickbacks as in money and land and different things like that from being willing to compromise with the North. So what ends up happening is they're kind of the political con men of the South, and they kind of trick everybody in the South into thinking that they're supporting them when they're actually supporting the North so they can get more money. Okay, the amendments, which are very important. Make sure you know those. 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. 13th Amendment comes first. Abraham Lincoln begins the 13th Amendment, but then he dies, so it's not ever signed into law. It's signed into law a few months after he dies. 13th Amendment bans slavery in the United States. So that's the important thing for the 13th. It bans slavery. 14th Amendment, think of immigration. 14th Amendment is citizenship. Okay? You are born in the United States, you are automatically a citizen. That gives African Americans the right to citizenship, and also it makes suffragettes mad because now it says the word male in the U.S. Constitution. The 15th Amendment is the right to vote. 14 and 15 are the one that a lot of people flip back and forth. 15th Amendment is the right to vote. That means that you have the ability to vote, but obviously it's not going to be as upheld, especially following the end of Reconstruction. So know the difference between those three. Other thing to know about the 14th Amendment is the 14th Amendment has that equal protection clause. Remember, we talked about that that's why the gay marriage ruling was able to go by, because they said everyone has equal protection. That becomes controversial later on. Okay, Rutherford's election. Very, very, very important. Okay, one of the most important ones on this whole board. Rutherford's election. This is where Rutherford B. Hayes goes to become the president. He is a Northern Republican. However, he goes to do the presidency and he does not get enough electoral votes in order to be able to win the presidency. Because of that, he meets with the Southern Democrats and they make a secret deal. If Rutherford B. Hayes becomes the president, they will take away the troops from the South. The troops were there trying to maintain order, make sure African Americans had the rights that they were supposed to be granted. As soon as those troops get removed from the South, violence rises, discrimination rises, the Jim Crow era begins, where people are going to begin to discriminate against African Americans because now there's nobody there to stop them. And Reconstruction as a whole, again, it's a really big topic, but Reconstruction is just the era of attempting to reconstruct and recreate the United States following the Civil War. Goes from 1865 until 1877, so begins with the end of the Civil War, ends with Rutherford B. Hayes' election. Has some short-term successes. Think schools, Freedmen's Bureau, black churches, things like that. But long-term negative impacts like sharecropping, black codes that eventually turned into Jim Crow laws. So overall, attempts probably over 40, 50 years would have been successful, but because we pulled the troops out of the South is going to go do their own thing. Also, the big thing with Reconstruction with like black codes and stuff is what is the role of the federal government and the state government? Remember, black codes are going to be the state government. Federal government, do you have power over that? At the time, the federal government says no, which is why black codes and Jim Crow laws are going to skyrocket. And that was everything. We actually had really short amounts. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
So when it's labeled like phase 2 where it says congressional,
Yes.
the definition was something about that like the radical Republicans had a lot of power over
Yes.
the policy.
Yeah.
So is that like the Civil Rights Act? And
That would have been the Civil Rights Act, yes.
Yeah.
But also there was several different gains during that time. So that's when the 14th and 15th Amendment gets passed in the U.S. Constitution. That's when a lot of laws are superseded by the... So that's like the radical Republicans, so the most successful time period of Reconstruction.
So was the main thing, like we talked about before, we were doing like we were solving like the problems, and like one of the problems is like what's going to stop the South from just seceding again?
Yes.
The main thing that stopped it was just the oath, the amnesty oath.
I would say it's a lot of compromises. So, I mean, that's a historical question that a lot of historians would disagree with. I would say that the major reason we stopped the secession from the South is we don't execute their leaders. We pardon the vast majority of them. We allow them back into the United States very quickly, and you can apply for citizenship with that loyalty oath. I would say it's because we weren't as... Somebody's taking a picture of us, which is kind of creepy. I don't know who that was. But anyways, so I would say that that's probably what I would say is we did a lot of compromise and we focused on reconciling. Oh my gosh, who is that person? Somebody should go out and see. Do it. Who is it? Is it somebody I know?
What's his name?
Oh, perfect.
The other Joseph in our class.
Oh, so he's from our class?
Yeah.
Oh, is it J.T. Kaufman?
Oh, that's
Okay.
I mean, that is Joseph.
Okay. Anyways, so that's what I would say. I would say it's because we did not impose harsh punishments, and they also were still continuing to be able to get away with things like black codes and sharecropping. I think that had sharecropping been somehow banned and the economy of the South didn't continue to grow with cotton, I think that you would have had more possible rebellion. Yeah.
So do you say that the SAQs was going to be on the Civil War and one thing doing Reconstruction?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So scalawags are going to be the salamanders of the South. They're the ones that are going to be the politicians that say they're Southern Democrats, but they're actually helping the Northern Republicans. Now, do you remember?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do the 14th and 15th amendments still specify men, or did that get changed?
No, they're still in there with that. But the thing that changes, I mean, you have to understand too, though, is that when a lot of these things, like when the women's feminist movement really begins in the 1960s and 70s, people also start to be conscious of how expensive it is to change a law. And you need 2/3 of people to approve that law. So when we're talking about why, for example, there are still laws on there that says that you can't tie a whale to a telephone pole, the reason why those laws still exist is because they are millions and millions of dollars to change. When they changed the state tree, it cost the state around $8 million just to have that law passed, plus almost $15 million to change all of the pamphlets that said the state tree and the stuff at the state capitol, to change the rooms and the maps for the state tree. It costs a ton of money. When they were going to change UTA's name to like rebrand it, that would have been $150 million to change just the name of UTA. So it costs a lot of money, so people don't change it.
Why do we have state trees and birds?
Because it's tradition. We've had these things for forever, just like we've had the state dinosaur. I don't know, it's something like unity.
What's our dinosaur?
It's the Utah raptor. Okay.
Nice.
Okay, this is not going to be on the AP exam though. So, any more questions about anything on the test or the quiz? All right, okay, if you have any questions, you can ask me. There's about 5 minutes left in class. Don't forget review session tomorrow during lunch as well.